What's good, Gotcha Gang? Kawaii50 back with another FGO video, here to talk about humanity's oldest king, the King of Heroes, one of the most powerful characters in Type Moon lore, period. That is, of course, Gilgamesh. Stats, craft essences, command codes, allies. As requested by one of our channel watchers, we are going over all of those things. So, like and subscribe if this video helps you out, and let's get into it. The King of Heroes has a quick Arts Buster deck and a legendary Buster type Noble Phantasm. All of these cards hit for 5 hits, and his extra card hits for 8. So Gil is going to be generating a lot of whatever he needs to generate off of any of his cards. Looking at his stats, his 13,097 HP is above average, but what is more impressive is his attack at 12,280. That's definitely on the higher end, and because of the way his Noble Phantasm works, that gets amplified. He's got a pretty okay NP per hit, especially when coupled with one of his skills. It's at a 0.34%, and that gets substantially higher when using that skill. His star absorption is typical for the Archer class at 153, so you can count on the greedy King of Heroes stealing most of your team stars, but you'll probably want him to have them. Gilgamesh's first skill is Charisma, rank A+. This increases the attack of all allies by 10.5 to 21% for 3 turns, and is on a relatively short 5-turn cooldown. I know it's surprising that the first skill of the King of Heroes isn't very selfish, but that is actually the case, and this skill helps all of your allies. I highly recommend maxing this skill first. It is Gilgamesh's primary damaging skill, and it helps all of your allies. So if you're bringing Gilgamesh on mixed nodes, the rest of your team is going to be able to help pick up the slack, even if Gilgamesh doesn't have class advantage. But honestly, it's not like he really needs it. Gil's second skill is Golden Rule, rank A, and this increases his Noble Phantasm gain by 20 to 50% for 3 turns, and this is on a 6-turn cooldown. I've invested a lot into Golden Rule personally, and I gotta say, the investment is well worth it. When you get to that higher end of NP gain, Gilgamesh's Noble Phantasm gauge just fires up. It can be absolutely insane, especially if you are hitting with some very potent chains because your deck draws were good. I still recommend maxing this skill last, even though it is very, very important. It's not really focused on damage, and plus Gil's third skill has an NP steroid, so that's going to be able to help out, and of course your supports are going to be able to help Gilgamesh get to his Noble Phantasm as well. Gil's upgraded third skill is Treasury of Babylon, rank EX. This increases his critical star gather rate by 300 to 600% and gives him a 20 to 30% NP steroid, and this is on a 5-turn cooldown, which is fairly short. I recommend maxing this skill second. There's a couple of things that are very important to mention in regards to this skill. Even at level 1, if you give Gilgamesh a Kaleidoscope, he is going to be able to immediately Noble Phantasm. So keep that in mind, especially when you're setting up your friends lists. And on top of that, with Treasury of Babylon having a crit star gather rate and the Archer class having a very, very high star weight, you are going to be able to field Gilgamesh relatively worry-free with some choice supports that a lot of players sort of malign just because they have a high star weight themselves, but we'll get into that in a sec. Gilgamesh's Noble Phantasm is the incomparable Enuma Elish. This increases his NP strength by 30%, and it activates before damage is dealt. And it deals 400 to 600% damage to all enemies. That seems low at first, but wait, there's more. It also has a bonus special attack boost to servant enemies that are weak to Enuma Elish. And honestly, it is easier to list the servants who are not weak to Enuma Elish rather than those who are. The vast majority of servants you fight in this game, people, are going to be weak to Enuma Elish. So that is a guaranteed extra 150 to 200% damage depending on overcharge. And with this Noble Phantasm being entirely overcharged base, that means you can use the Noble Phantasms of other servants that are more supportive or more about buffing your team. Like, say, Merlin's Garden of Avalon. You can easily use that first and follow it up with Enuma Elish and actually see an overall damage increase. There is a fairly extensive list of craft essences that overall make Gilgamesh very effective. The three main stats that we are looking for are Buster Card Effectiveness, NP Strength, as well as Critical Damage Boost. Buster cards, of course, affect his Noble Phantasm, NP Strength also affects his Noble Phantasm, and Critical Strength benefits from his very high star weight. But there are actually a couple of craft essences out there that grant an NP overcharge bonus, and when it comes to certain challenge quests or certain boss fights in the story, these can be especially effective on Gilgamesh, because remember, his Enuma Elish bonus damage is completely dependent on his overcharge, so you're going to be able to bump that extra damage up by an extra 25% using one of those craft essences. Let's of course start with our freebie options. The first of your two freebie options is going to be Joint Recital. This craft essence from Nerofest grants Buster Effectiveness as well as critical damage, helping out Gilgamesh a lot with his normal attacks. If you're looking for a better freebie focus on Gilgamesh's Noble Phantasm, then you'll probably want to try Hero Ellie's Adventure. This has Buster Card Effectiveness as well as a substantial NP Strength boost of 25% if you max limit broke it. If you're confident that Noble Phantasms are going to be your main source of damage, you of course can never go wrong with the Black Grail. If you're lucky enough to max limit break one of these, which I just did, I'm pretty stoked about that, you are going to be getting an NP Strength boost of 80%. And that's going to be on top of the 30% boost he already gives himself when the Noble Phantasm is activated. If you were very summon happy during Guda Guda Meiji Restoration, you might have a copy of Demon King of the Sixth Heaven lying about. I unfortunately was not able to get this craft essence, but I wish I had. This provides Buster Card Effectiveness and NP Strength, and at maximum break, this is a 20% to both of those categories. So you sacrifice a little bit of NP Strength because of that, but because you get the overall bonus effectiveness on Gil's 2 Buster cards, I do generally consider this better than Hero Ellie's Adventure. The following 3 craft essences are going to focus on upping Gilgamesh's NP overcharge, and I'm going to start with one I consider very underrated, and that is Duke of Flame. Duke of Flame grants Gilgamesh a 20% NP strength boost, as well as increases his NP overcharge by 2 levels. For servants that have very, very specific overcharge bonuses, or overcharge bonuses that are the main source of their DPS, this craft essence can be a sleeper hit in your arsenal, and that applies to Gilgamesh. Devilish Bodhisattva is of course the standard, but you are going to be getting a little less damage out of this. This trades the damage boost for a starting NP steroid, and starting NP steroids can be really helpful, especially since Gilgamesh has an NP steroid skill of his own. And finally, for prolonged fights, you might want to consider Those Who Seek Salvation. This craft essence only gives an NP overcharge boost by 2, but instead of it just happening, say, once, like those other 2 craft essences I just mentioned, this provides that NP overcharge by 2 a minimum of 3 times. And if you max limit break this craft essence, that is 4 instances of NP overcharge boosting. For prolonged challenge quests, this might be your go-to. When it comes to Buster supports, you of course can never go wrong with Merlin. The man is just still a tank. But there are plenty of other options for Gilgamesh, even just outside your general supporters like say your Helena Blavatsky or your Waver. Nightingale Santa is, I think, a very, very underrated character, and she is a supporter that Gilgamesh can actually take full advantage of. Even though she's got a really high star weight, well, Gilgamesh has a skill that ends up getting around that. Her third skill is going to grant Gilgamesh attack as well as critical strength, and her second skill is going to increase Gilgamesh's NP strength as well as give him guts. Plus, she's got a debuff cleanse on a single debuff, and she can recover Gilgamesh's HP. Da Vinci Rider, of course, has a very, very high star weight, but Gilgamesh can at the bare minimum compete with that. Her third skill is going to grant Gilgamesh NP strength, an NP gauge steroid of 10%, which doesn't seem like much, but every little percentage point counts. And she also has the ability to increase Gilgamesh's NP overcharge level by 1 stage. Remember, this does stack with any NP overcharge stage boosting craft essences you have on Gilgamesh, so you're going to be able to potentially get the maximum amount of damage out of his Enuma Elish. After a fair amount of buffs, Osakabe Hime actually becomes a fairly good supporter for Gilgamesh as well. She can provide him with a defense boost, she can increase his overall critical damage, she can give him an NP gauge steroid and a star drop rate boost, decrease the enemy's defense, remove their buffs, and grant Gilgamesh a max HP boost, an additional defense boost from her Noble Phantasm, and quick card and buster card effectiveness. Seriously, when they buffed her, they really wanted to make sure Osakabe Hime was going to be valuable. And of course, how could I not mention the current star of the buster meta on JP, the new rising star, Queen Himiko. The benefits that Queen Himiko provides for Gilgamesh are numerous. She can increase his attack. She can grant 8 critical stars each turn for all allies for 3 turns upon using that. She can increase her own NP gauge and provide a little bit of damage if necessary, but it is her Noble Phantasm that really is the star when it comes to helping Gilgamesh. It provides him buster card effectiveness, NP overcharge level, as well as critical strength. All 3 of these things we know by now that Gilgamesh wants, and if Himiko provides, well, there's no reason not to send them both onto the battlefield. Gilgamesh's command codes are mainly going to be focused on damage. When it comes to his arts cards, as usual, we want to chuck any sort of critical star gather rate on those, so Gilgamesh can benefit from gaining the maximum amount of Noble Phantasm from them. So, Immature Illusionary Command Seal is always a safe bet, and Gilgamesh is eating all of your stars anyways, so I guarantee some of those are going to flow to his buster and quick cards as well. For Gilgamesh's quick card, I wouldn't so much recommend critical star drop rate. I mean, you can absolutely do that if you don't have anything else to give him, but if you're building a team around this man, the rest of your team's job is going to be generating critical stars for Gilgamesh to use. So instead, why don't we focus on something else? I'd like to recommend Magus of Flowers. Once every 3 turns, it's going to charge Gil's NP gauge by 10% when attacking using the engraved card. If you can, you're probably going to end up using that quick card with some sort of arts card, so why don't you gain some Noble Phantasm off of it? You're still going to gain Noble Phantasm off that quick card, just let's get a little more. For Gilgamesh's buster cards, let's focus on critical damage. We want all of our crit stars to flow to those buster cards. We're going to have some allies that are going to help us do that in a Perfect Chaldea, and Gilgamesh is going to be able to maximize that damage. So we're looking for something like Mistress of the Heavens, which increases critical damage by 25% when engraved on a buster card. This is really going to help out Gilgamesh when it comes to finishing off those hit by Enuma Elish. But on top of that, maybe you didn't like some of the other suggestions I had for Gil's quick and arts cards, or maybe you feel like you can free up a buster card. Regardless, on pretty much any card you want, you can go ahead and give him Da Vinci Chan, and it is going to be very effective. It will increase his NP damage by 15%. You'll have to use that card before you use Enuma Elish, but the damage trade-off always ends up being worth it. Overall, gang, Gilgamesh has really lived up to the high expectations we as a community have had for him. Enuma Elish is just so incredibly powerful and so potent that neutral damage honestly means nothing to this man. He is able to just obliterate absolutely everything that is in his way. Gilgamesh's buster cards are going to be able to eat a ton of crit stars and deal significant amounts of damage, especially in Brave Chains. He's got the NP gain to refresh his Noble Phantasm. He's able to help out all of his allies by granting them an attack buff, and his critical star gather skill makes it so he can even play with some of the supports who normally would be a little bit subpar because they'd be eating stars, but in the presence of the King of Heroes, they are able to reach maximum effectiveness. Gilgamesh is fantastic. That's all I got to say about that. But of course, I want to know what you all think, so go ahead and let me know your thoughts about Gilgamesh down in the comment section below. Allies, craft essences, command codes, the whole shebang. Let me know what you're using on him, and if an event popped up where he was available on Raid Up, let me know if you pulled him. Let's all share in your victory. This is Kawaii50. Gang, if you want to talk FGO, hit us up on the Discord. And if you think I'm doing a good job, my Patreon is available as well. Big thank you to all of the patrons out there. I am still floored every time I look and see that people actually want to patronize me. Y'all are the best. I hope you're having a phenomenal day. I'll see you all in the next one.